Alright, decided feel like doing some stuff today of the F100 variety. So, plan today is to get rid of our old, worn out, and tired transmission on this truck. I was able to move it from its resting spot over in the side yard back into the driveway. But the bands in this thing are just totally shot. You have to give it all it's got in drive just to get it to creep forward. And it works in reverse, but when you go to drop it into reverse, it loads up until finally it just grabs and then the tires just start spinning. So the bands are just totally jacked. Everything in that transmission probably needs to be replaced. And it's really not worth rebuilding. So I was able to source an entirely new to me, rebuilt but in good shape C4 with a torque converter, with a flywheel should we need it, and I got all of it for $400. Can't beat that. The thing's been rebuilt about 3-4 years ago from looking at the stickers on it. The torque converter has a born on date or a rebuild date of like 21, I think. So much better than we got. Great deal for it, I think, and it's going to make a great addition to the cheap F100. So plan's going to be today, I'm hoping at the least transmission removal, but I'm going to throw a different spin on it. We're going to try something different today, mostly because it's a transmission removal. There's not a whole lot to talk about, and also I'm going to be listening to some music and kind of get in the groove while I'm doing it. And to avoid those fun copyright notices that YouTube sends out, I'm going to lay over some different music over top. And this video is going to be virtually speechless, which, I don't know, you might like, you might not. Sometimes I feel like I talk entirely too much on these things. So, we'll get you guys going. We'll take breaks. I'll explain things if we need to here and there. But figure you guys could just sit back, relax, and watch me tinker. Alright, taking a quick break before we get into final removal. I needed some removal juice. Windy today. It's fun when you get like 30-mile-an-hour gusts and the transmission fluid just spritzes you in the face, you know? But we're making good progress, so hopefully I caught most of what I was doing in my time lapse. It's tricky with the camera up under there. There's not a ton of room because I opted not to jack this thing up to do all this. It's still flat on all fours. So, so far we've gotten the drive shaft out. we got the cross member to frame bolts out for the transmission cross member. We've got the starter out. We got the flywheel bolts to the flywheel to torque converter bolts are removed. What else we got? So we got the starter out. We got all the linkage is disconnected. We got the transmission cooler lines disconnected. I got the vacuum modulator disconnected. So really, all that remains holding this thing in, I believe, is just the block to transmission bell housing bolts, and then the 2 bolts holding the transmission to the cross member. So what I'm going to do is leave the cross member for last. I'm going to go ahead and loosen those, but then I'm going to take all my bolts out of the bell housing, and then we'll try and jack this thing up and yank it out of here. There's actually some sketchy stuff I found on this thing, and I may kind of break it down and show you some of it in detail later, but I noticed when I first got under there, some of the bolts on the drive shaft at the rear end had a lock washer and a regular washer, and some didn't, which was an indicator that someone had been into that thing before. Some of the washers look brand new, or at least newer. So that was kind of odd. And then the transmission cross member, of the 4 bolts holding it in, one had no nut on it. One was finger tight and flopping around, and only one on each side were tight at all. So someone had been jacking around with that. Got even farther into it, and I've noticed that there's actually a couple bolts not in there between transmission, bell housing, and engine, which will make it easier for disassembly, I guess. And of the 4 bolts holding the torque converter to the flywheel, 2 of them were stripped out and had teeth marks from vice grips, and you can probably see in my time lapse where I had to do the same thing to remove. Luckily, whatever idiot did that, did it putting it together, is my assumption, because they weren't super tight, and I was luckily able to break them free with the vice grip. So they had stripped ones they reinstalled for some reason instead of putting in new ones, and just left it that way. So here's my thoughts on what's going on with this thing. I think that one of 2 scenarios happened with this truck. Someone got a used or engine and transmission that ran a long time ago, they thought was still good, and stuck them in this to try and get this thing up and running. Also, I know the engine's been out because the front engine cradle also not bolted in tight and flopping around. So we're going to tighten that too. I think somebody had a motor transmission they stuck in this thing to try and give it a new drive line and get it on the road, and then realized that either the engine was locked up like it was when I got it, or that the transmission was slipping so badly they let it sit, and that's what caused the engine to lock up. Or that's what I think probably happened. Was somebody stuck an unknown, and I've made that mistake too. You stick an unknown set of stuff in there, and then it either works or it doesn't. And then the other scenario could be someone had this thing and they were like, hey, body, I mean, it's not perfect. Cab's great on this thing, but the bed's pretty rusted out. I mean, it's got some issues for sure. So maybe somebody bought it and had a good or rebuilt engine and trans in it. They yanked it out to put it in their project that was in better shape or that they were more attached to, and they took the old donor stuff, you know, and they transplanted it back in here just to give this thing a full setup to sell it and get rid of it. I don't suspect that being the case, because I don't know why you'd have gone through the trouble. Usually, if that's the case, there's just an engine and transmission in the bed. So my thought is somebody swapped this thing, got all excited about it, and then they had a bad organ donor, and they left it to sit. Either way, I'm hoping to rectify that today. It's only like 1:30, I think. We started this thing at about, I don't know, 10:30, 11:30. So I mean, we're only like 2 hours deep, 3 hours deep in this thing, and we're about to pull the old transmission out. So there is a chance, because of the time change and all that good stuff, and I've got like 5 or 6 more hours of daylight, there's a chance I get this out and the new one back in today. Slim chance, but we're gonna keep on trucking and see what happens.
And she's out. Nasty little bugger. Torque converter flopped out with it. Not a tremendous amount of oil slung up in here, which makes me think rear main's probably not a problem, but we'll check it from underneath. We're gonna probably steal the linkage off this one to swap onto the other. I'll probably take this too. This is just kind of like a, I guess to me it looks like an aftermarket, almost like a protector for the drive shaft. Might swap that on to the new one just to have it also. We'll take the probably the tubing off these and stick it on that one, since the other one was in a Mustang last. It's a truck trans, but it was in a 67 Mustang, so my guess is everything's bent in the wrong directions for what we need. But she's out, she's free. What a mess. But we are sans transmission under here. Dig it. So I got almost to the point of quitting for the day. I literally used the last 2% that I had in me to get this thing out. But it's out, it's free, definitely not reinstalling today. I am gonna roll this thing forward in the driveway and clean up this murder scene I've got here. That thing is dumping once it goes down. So let's get to cleaning.